This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
It's time for Emergence News on Plains FM 96.9, Citizen-Made Radio.
Kia ora and welcome. Namaste. This is Emergence News. My name is Nigel, and joining me in the studio today are John and Peter. Good
Morning,
to see
Nigel.
you guys.
Morning, Peter.
Hello there, Nigel.
We had an extraordinary program last time. John, you talked about
Death and dying.
death and dying. Very interesting.
I've got some more sitting here if we need it, don't you worry.
so-
Benjamin Creme talks about death and dying and karma and reincarnation constantly.
So if we've got time,
We can come back.
we can come back and sort of do a bit of a follow-up.
I'm poised, Nigel. I'm
How
poised.
wonderful. And Peter, before we go to you, Peter, just give us a taste of what you were covering today for us.
Yes, I was intrigued by the September editor's comment on the Share International, and I thought it would be very beneficial to bring that through.
Okay, so we'll be with Peter in just a moment. Just to cover something which has been looked at in detail many times on this program, and it's a central teaching of Maitreya's, is honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. And honesty of mind, well, I always remember Peter's response to you when you talked about that. Peter you said, what does that mean? And Peter said, don't lie. And sincerity of spirit, John, what would you say to that?
When you are honest and you have conversations with others, you are more sincere. And the ability to have heart-to-heart conversations comes from that place of personal honesty. So when we talk about honesty, sincerity and detachment, we're not talking just about being honest with others. Nigel, I really don't like the colour of the shirt you're wearing. Or Peter, I love what you're doing with your goatee. Actually, the starting point is being honest with yourself. The idea I like is you're scrubbing your own thoughts with the steel brush of honesty. And it starts with you, that self-scrutiny. And actually Krishnamurti, a huge amount of his teaching is self-reflection, is that ability to look at yourself and understand what you're doing and how you're behaving.
It's such an interesting topic. And last time you spoke on this, I thought I must investigate detachment a bit more. Yep. Anyway, I opened Maitreya's teachings, The Laws of Life, and I came across pages 25 and 26. And he talks about attachment in regard to the body, the mind, and the spirit. This won't take long. I just took a couple of excerpts which really nailed it for me. Attachment to the body. Benjamin Creme says, there is no end of material desires and sensual gratifications. Greed grows, the search continues, the satisfaction always eludes you. So that's attachment to the body. Attachment to the mind. You become entangled in thought construction, ideologies, and isms. The more you search, the further afield you go. The more you find there will always be unknown regions. You can get lost, and you do not feel fulfilled. And attachment to the spirit, this is interesting. He says it's possible to dabble in regions which can never be fully understood via a host of isms, such as occultism and spiritualism. To dabble means to misuse. Maitreya says, do not become attached to the physical form of a master. You will grieve when they are not there, when they are gone. Jesus warned against the misuse of powers. He said, even if you come across them, even if they develop in you, do not become attached to them. If you do, they will destroy you. They are not yours. What's your interpretation of that, Peter?
Well, it's certainly right on, isn't it? It's just, it requires taking on board and thinking about.
And John, the attachment of the body, the attachment of the mind, the attachment of spirit, they were all advice and warnings, weren't they?
Yes, and I think the thing that we don't understand is that you can get attached to the good stuff. So when you start developing your spiritual life, you start developing superpowers, right? You start developing good things.
Intuition.
Yeah. You become more gentle, you become more aware, you become more observant. Don't get attached to those. Don't get attached to the good things that come out of your personal growth.
Including a guru or a master,
right,
or a teacher that you're following.
Or the right teachings. Don't get attached. Don't get attached to love. That's a biggie. You know, we fall in love and we get attached to love. Don't get attached to love. Have a degree of detachment around your relationships, even though they might be the best thing that's ever happened to you. So, yeah, it's challenging. But it's that ability to stand back and observe your behaviour and observe the things around you and just have that little bit of distance.
And self-awareness.
Yeah, when I was talking to my friend, I said we're all bell ringers. I've been reading a book about bell ringers, and I'll talk about bell ringers a bit later on when we talk about detachment.
Editor's comment from Share International, the September issue. Urgent, potent action needed is the headline. Knowing, even only theoretically, the future of the United States as foreseen by the Masters, and knowing that its destiny is part of the divine plan for the future of this planet, the possible reactions of many readers of this magazine are perfectly understandable. Much of the world's population is ashamed and saddened for humanity. The careless and distracted couldn't care less. The brainwashed, the invested, and those who have sold their souls applaud. And those who see do as much as they can, but those who are often muzzled and their protests broken up, judged to be illegal by governments that are part of the great disgrace. Will history forgive or forget an event that is a blot on our collective karmic record? It was bad enough when we turned a blind eye to hunger and mass poverty in many areas of the world. It was abhorrent when our governments ignored the international humanitarian law and the law of the sea to shut its ports and borders to desperate migrants. It has become worse as we witness the massacre of civilians, the slaughter of children, the destruction of a country and its people. It becomes more unbearable by the day as we watch insane crimes against humanity, genocide, and ethnic cleansing. We are already carrying the burden of those horrors, but now we are also disgraced. A murderous leader of an extremist regime that is deemed guilty of crimes against humanity was invited into the heart of American democracy. Not destructive enough that he was in the halls of government, but he lied in Congress, and he was rewarded with a standing ovation in the House of the People. What harm was done in that event to justice, to truth, to the authority of the people's voice and its representatives? What spectacle has given Israel carte blanche, the full permission and backing of the United States to continue to massacre, to expand the theatre of war in the region, the consequences of which insanity we can only guess at? It is clear that Netanyahu wants and needs a wider war, and if possible with Iran. How self-serving and cynical an approach to the lives and deaths of others, giving yourself a get-out-of-jail-free card, since a prolonged war delays a prison sentence for the serving Prime Minister of Israel, just as holding high office would stave off a prison sentence for presidential candidates in other countries, like the US, for example. The world awaits the emergence of American soul, that which gave birth to the beauty of the Marshall Plan so long ago. The world too awaits the emergence of Maitreya to show men the way. The teachings of Maitreya will awaken and evoke the idealistic soul of the United States and turn its best citizens to the light which they have always held in their hearts. They will make accord with their brothers and sisters throughout the world, and in unison, inspired by Maitreya, they will bring justice and therefore peace to the waiting world. While the world waits, and with our eyes on November election in the US, we could do worse than read the following challenging text written by the Master Joel Kuhl in the externalization of the hierarchy to encourage the then neutral United States into joining the Allied forces in World War II. Rage threatening the future of free humanity. In the following excerpt he writes, "Will you use your prayers for peace and then patiently wait for the forces of good to fight your battle and for God to do the work? The forces of death are abroad today, but it is the death of liberty, the death of free speech, the death of freedom and human action, the death of truth and of the higher spiritual values. I would say to those who preach a passive attitude to the face of evil, human suffering, and who endorse the pacifism which invokes no risk, what do you propose to fight the forces of aggression, of treachery, evil, destruction, which are today stalking our planet? What weapons do you bring to this combat? How will you begin to stem the onslaught and arrest the whirlwind? Will you use prayers for peace and then patiently wait for the forces of good to fight your battle and for God to do the work? I tell you that your prayers and your wishes are unavailing when divorced from right and potent action. Your prayers and petitions may reach the throne of God, symbolically speaking, but then the reply comes forth. The forces of light will strengthen your arms and turn the tide in your favour if you stand up and fight for what you desire. You will arrest the progress of aggressive selfishness if the men and women of goodwill rest back upon their idealism and do naught that is practical to justify their hope or aid for the materialism of the desired ideal." So you can see the hierarchy are not great fans of pacifism.
That's interesting, isn't it? And I guess we need to remind our listeners that World War I and World War II, A, were the same war, and B, were the forces of the Antichrist, so that they had a global and a spiritual kind of basis, where a lot of the warfare we're seeing now is driven by greed, is driven by lust for power, is proxy wars structured by powerful nations in someone else's sandpit to gain control and power, where World War I and World War II had a deeply spiritual process sitting behind them. It's interesting, isn't it? Pacifism, basically Joel Kuhl saying stand up for what you believe and make a difference.
Yes, roll your sleeves up.
Okay, so if we roll our sleeves up, Peter, what can we do to make a difference here in New Zealand? If somebody's listening to this program, give us a couple of examples, guys. What can we do to make a difference?
Well, protesting, I think, is one of the actions that we can all take. You know, it's
protesting. Yes,
the government's sort of asleep at the wheel.
I think protest, absolutely. I think intelligent, calm, directed protest with a well-discussed reasons for protest. Our streets full of angry people, even though the anger is justified, achieves nothing. And we saw that in this country around the COVID protests. You know, it was disparate, it was uninformed, and it was splinter groups arguing within themselves.
And eventually got out of control.
But yes, I believe in protest as long as you're clear on what you're protesting about and your demands are obvious. The other thing I would say to our listeners is be careful who you vote for. Don't vote for the colour of tie. Don't vote for some cheap, nasty little short-term tax break that's going to give you $50 a fortnight in your pocket. You're being bribed. You're being manipulated.
And then wonder why the youth, a generation later, are unhappy.
Yes. So be very careful who you vote for and make them accountable. The other thing I would say to our listeners is understand the issues. Be informed. Understand the things that are approaching this country and that are the great challenges. And lo and behold, they're mainly global. So, yeah, there is a number of things that we can do through the political process.
Yes. It doesn't mean we necessarily have to grab a rifle and
shoot your neighbour.
Opposition, but there are lots of things that we can do, and United Nations is not necessarily the be-all, end-all as it is at the moment, but it's certainly an area where we do need to start to make
it's a step
progress.
in the right direction, Benjamin Cream's talked about boycott. You know, why don't we start boycotting 3 of the 4 fossil fuel companies in this country? Why don't we start boycotting one of the supermarket chains as a protest? That's what I mean by protest. Boycott. Don't buy their stuff.
That's right.
Right? Don't buy their stuff. Now, some of their stuff you need, but let's be really selective. In this country, we've got a Kiwi bank, which is a government-owned bank, right, which they set up decades ago in an attempt to be competition to the 4 major banks in this country. Shift everything to Kiwi Bank. Boycott the 4 big greedy banks in this country that are making record profits. Boycott them.
Because the money's not being reinvested.
It's going overseas. It's going to shareholders. It's going to leadership teams. It's going to the CEO.
It's this trickle-ups thing, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not being seeded into this country. So, yeah, boycott's an interesting tool. Basically what Gandhi did, he withdrew labour. Right? Crippled the British Empire, withdrew labour.
He was quite brilliant at the art of protest.
Yeah, you know, we should all be reading about Gandhi. It should be the curriculum in high schools. How do you make change? You withdraw. You pull back. You don't engage.
This is the Emergence News on Plains FM. For more information, go to shareinternational.org.
John, before we cross back to you, what were you talking about on the last program?
I was talking about death and dying, Nigel.
And death and dying, and you've got a bit of a follow-up for us?
Well, yes, I've got some more stuff that I sort of touched on that Benjamin Cream, and I'm still in the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, that book. He's talking about can you come in either as a man or a woman? Benjamin Cream goes back and says everybody has incarnations as both men and women. Not necessarily alternately. You might have 2 or 3 incarnations as a man and then 3 or 4 as a woman, then 1 or 2 as a man, and so on and so on. So I'd like to say to an awful lot of politicians on this planet, male politicians, you were a mother once. What is your problem with women and mothers? You know, J.D. Vance's comment about childless cat ladies. For goodness sake, J.D., you were a woman at one point, and you may have been childless at one point, but you don't know, so shut up, right? Just mad stuff. What about reincarnating in different races? Benjamin Cream comes back with pretty much the same thing. We might be in the same race for a large number of incarnations, or we might have a succession of different experiences over 6 races, or we might be restricted only to one race. We might never incarnate in the East if we're in the West, and never in the West if we're in the East, or we might flip between one another for many incarnations. It has to do with individual destiny. And he finishes this off with So you can learn. He's asked, so you can learn the lessons, repeat the experiences, or gain the experience. You need to reach this point of perfection through different races or racial combinations. Benjamin Creme comes back with, yes, we're all human beings, we're all God's children, and we all have the same potential. And, I like to think of culture as the jacket we are wearing for this lifetime. We change our jackets, right? Possibly thousands of times.
Yep.
Don't cling to the culture.
Don't get attached.
Don't get attached.
Even
Don't
if it's
cling
good.
to the culture or the race you're currently wearing.
If it feels comfortable, don't get attached to it.
Don't get attached
Not
to it.
Not too attached.
Yeah.
Yeah, the interesting thing that's come to mind just listening to what you're talking about and Creme's answers to some of those questions regarding reincarnation is it just brings to home for me how important the environment, restoring the health of the planet is, and the environmental issues that face us all. Because if there is something that happens regarding rebirth and we come back, it's in our best interest to look after the places. We don't want to come back to a planet where we're choking instead of breathing.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing that I thought about, Nigel, as you were saying that was if your incarnational experience is cut short because of the state of the planet, you'll have to have another one. Right? So if you're in a hurry to get off this planet, if you're in a hurry to become a master and rejoin the travellers flying around the cosmos, dropping off at different planets, then look after the one you're on so you can have a longer experience while you're here and get the job done.
Because this blue planet is actually quite beautiful, isn't it?
It's quite beautiful.
It is,
Yeah.
Do you remember that photograph from Apollo 11?
Just amazing.
The beauty of the planet.
Yeah. I'd like to address this next comment from Benjamin Creme to our billionaire friends. Basically, he's talking about free will and he's asked a question so you don't escape. And Benjamin Creme comes back with, there is no escape until you have learned to be perfect. I do not mean perfect in the religious sense, being good and believing this and not believing that, and doing this and not doing that. I mean being perfect in the sense that the masters are perfect, which is having complete control of your physical, emotional, mental and spiritual nature. So there is no escape. We're on this cycle. We're on this planet. And so you've got to play the game. You've got to be aware that harmlessness is the way forward. And if you're a billionaire, I'd like to be able to discuss with you how you accumulated that wealth and who you hurt in the process.
All right, so to finish with the program today, we're going to go back to you, John. What have you got there for us?
I'm going to finish with Benjamin Creme, who, honestly, I'm a fanboy of this guy. He's asked, what is the best way to avoid making bad karma? Benjamin Creme comes back with one word, harmlessness. To recognise and accept that harmlessness in relation to others is the key to the evolutionary process. When we really create harmlessness, we create right human relations. Nigel, big question, buddy. How do you practice harmlessness?
I am becoming more careful and less careless with what I verbalise. And it's work in progress, to be honest with you.
That dirty mouth of yours.
Yeah. It really is tough. I have been very careless. When I look back at, accumulating bad karma in my life, it has been through the power of the word. You cannot underestimate it.
Yes.
And it's all about, for me, it's all about being less careless in what I say and therefore what I think and what I do.
Yes, okay. Peter, how do you practice harmlessness?
I think it's a sense of goodwill towards humanity is essential to be able to do that. I find that for me it works. It's just a feeling of, you might disagree with what everyone's saying and that sort of thing, but it's a sense of goodwill towards them and their opinions, and it creates that sort of non-attachment.
It's a good old-fashioned value, goodwill. I remember the days when somebody would sell a small business in this country and all the value was in goodwill.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember those days?
I do remember. Interesting.
John.
Yes.
What else have you got?
How do I practice harmlessness?
Yeah.
I don't. I'm crap at it. I'm angry. I'm irritable. I'm frustrated at the state of the planet. I'm overly emotional, and I'm constantly having to check myself. But I think the key for me, Nigel, is the same for you. Watch what I say. Think before I open my mouth.
Pause. Take a deep breath.
Yeah. But honestly, my karmic
debt... It takes discipline, doesn't it?
Yeah. My karmic debt must be massive. I don't think I want to come back. Honestly, I'm aggressive, I'm pushy.
Why do we all love you then, John?
I don't know.
How do you do it?
It's the medication.
All this information can be found on the Share International website, www.share-international.org, and also don't forget the podcasts, which are available on the Plains FM website.
We welcome your comments, questions and feedback. Please contact us at emergencenews@gmail.com.